Right, let's move on to COVID topics for a moment. As important as they are to something equally critical, and of course, I said at the top of the show, it's education. We saw reports yesterday that 10% of would-be teaching graduates fail the exam they need to qualify as a teacher. This is even after all their years of study. Today, there was also another onslaught of political correctness directed at our school curriculum and literature. Education experts from the University of Melbourne have spent 3 years analysing texts and books used by Victorian high school students, and they say there's not enough racial, sexual or gender diversity. Researchers Alex Bacalja and Lauren Bliss found that 4% of texts were written by Indigenous creators, 64% written by males, and 78% of protagonists identified as heterosexual. They say that's a problem. Dr Mr Donnelly is a Senior Research Fellow at the Australian Catholic University and co-author of the review of the Australian curriculum a number of years ago, and also an author himself of a politically correct dictionary and guide. He joins me now from Melbourne. Well, first of all, you're an author and you're straight and you're male and you're white. Goodness me, you've got a black mark against you from the outset. But what did you make of these findings, Kevin?
Well, there was nothing unusual about it, Peter. Even the national curriculum, when I reviewed that, was very biased. And only last year, the AATE, the Australian Association Teachers for English, they put out a journal where they said you have to have more LGBTQI plus people, Indigenous people. It's all about victimhood. It's all about identity politics. What we're forgetting, and I taught literature for over 12 years at Year 12. Mm-hmm. I was on the panel of examiners. What we need is to choose literary works for their aesthetic and moral value. We shouldn't be about victim politics and identity politics. Let's choose books on their merit.
In the study, they said out of 402 protagonists identified, 78% were heterosexual, 18% had no identifiable sexuality, and just 4% were identifiably homosexual. Now, sure, Shakespeare wasn't a gay black woman, or at least we don't know that he was, but that doesn't diminish his significance to literature. Now, if we only put on the shelves books written by authors that meet a definition, well, we're not going to necessarily get the best of any genre, are we? And we'd all be so much poorer for that. It's what's between the covers of the book, not the identity of the person writing the book. Isn't that where we should be, Kevin?
Absolutely. And I'm just rereading Patrick White, A Fringe of Leaves. And one of the things that strikes me is the use of language. I mean, he's able to put together dialogue. He can use metaphors, similes. He can describe a scene, which is so evocative, so powerful in terms of addressing issues about human nature, about what we have to suffer in terms of the world in which we live. So we need to really think more about the, what I said, the moral, the spiritual. These values in literature are so vital for young people in particular because they give them a grounding in terms of being able to cope with all the myriad issues we have to face as we go through life. And I get back to the fact that if you're simply going to have quotas, for example, if you look at Indigenous people, they're only about 2.8% of the population. So does that mean we only have 2 or 3 books? I mean, it's ridiculous. If you look at LGBTQI plus people, they're about 4 or 5% of the population. If we go down that road, we're going to have a very unbalanced, biased selection of texts, and it will do nothing to help young people in terms of appreciating the what is so valuable about literature.
The Victorian Education Shadow Minister, Cindy McLeish, said, these sort of culture wars are the last thing we need and we've got to get back to the basics. She put out a statement today. And I think she's absolutely right. I mean, given where we are in terms of literacy and numeracy, surely that's got to be our focus.
It does, and that's what amazes me about the AATE, the National Association, and it's been there for many years now. A colleague of mine, Mark Lopez, is putting out a book shortly, in about another month or 2, looking at these issues, and he tutors Year 12 students, he tutors teachers who are doing teacher training, and he's chapter and verse proving that, in fact, what's been happening over the last 10, 15 years is that the cultural left the political correctness movement has taken the march through universities, teacher training, subject associations, and we've moved away from what is most valuable in terms of what English can do. Now, obviously, that includes literacy. But as I get back to, we also need to talk about cultural literacy. If you don't know what Pandora's box is, Achilles' heel, if you've never read Shakespeare or Jane Austen or Margaret Atwood, then you haven't really encountered those existential questions about love, about hate, about resilience, about overcoming adversity. And they're the very things we need to give our young people, especially in these difficult times.
I couldn't have said it better than myself. That's beautifully done, Kevin Donnelly. You're spot on. Although I did read something the other day that a female medico wants to change the term Achilles' heel. I don't know if you saw that. I don't know why, but it's all about feminist medical theory, I suspect. Kevin Donnelly, you'll always have a job coming on talking about many of these issues. Thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure, Peter.